Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Tim Jedrick. I am here with Right Rudder Marketing, and today we are doing our podcast. And we have a special guest. Our special guest is Gordon. Gordon is the founder of Rainier Flight Service. In fact, he has quite the story to tell. I was actually introduced to him by a colleague of mine, Andrew at Purdue Global. He had a very interesting story, and then I just sent a few messages, and next thing you know, he's on the show. Just putting this out there for anybody that's interested in, becoming a guest on the podcast. Just make sure you send us a message, and we're very happy to have you on. Tell us your story. Before I don't want to give too much away, kind of Gordon get into his details. How about you give us a small introduction, Gordon, and we can kind of take it from there.
Well, thank you, Tim. I appreciate you having me. My background is all things airplanes. Ever since I was a little kid, it's probably a familiar story to a lot of your listeners, but I just love looking up and watching the airplanes, travel. Who knows where the sense of freedom, something about it was just, it spoke to me. So when I decided to actually pursue aviation as a career at that time in the early 90s, I thought, well, you need to go and get like an aviation degree, right? You have to go to a 4-year university or go to the military and get the qualification. So I ended up going to the University of North Dakota. I got a fantastic education, all of my certificates and ratings. Upon graduating, I ended up moving back to the Seattle area where I grew up and started teaching out of a tiny flight school next to our local military base, little 2,500 foot runway, barely wide enough to keep both main tires on the pavement at the same time. And taught for a couple of years, where I then realized I probably learned more in 1 year of teaching than I did in 4 years of college.
Yeah.
There's nothing that speaks to just experience, getting in there, making mistakes, learning from it, passing it along to others. And that's where I really developed a passion for teaching. Being able to assist people and help them realize their goals is something that I really enjoyed. However, I still wanted to pursue that lifelong career flying jets in the flight levels. So I ended up getting actually a job running a flight school first out in St. Louis, in your neck of the woods. So we had a great operation down there. It was a fantastic group of people. We ran a flight school out of Spirit Airport in Chesterfield until I got my credentials up where I was competitive for a job at the regionals, and then was hired at Horizon Air in Seattle. So flew Dash 8 turboprops, over the mountains in the ice at night for another 7, 8 years. Got a lot of really great experience doing that. And then was hired by Alaska Airlines, and am currently still a line captain at Alaska, flying 737s all the way from Alaska to Hawaii to Florida and everywhere in between.
Good. Yeah. So you're still in Alaska Airlines. However, somehow in between the mix here too, you started a flight school too. So you said you were working at a flight school. You were in St. Louis, then you came. I think you said Republic, and then Alaska. How did Rainier Flight Service, I guess, come into being?
Well, that's an interesting story. If many of you remember, 2008 was a pretty tough economic time. Not just aviation, but all kinds of businesses throughout the country were really struggling financially with the economic recession. And airlines were hit particularly hard. There were a lot of layoffs in the industry. And I was, a fairly new pilot at the time, so pretty junior on the seniority list. And they said, I'm sorry, but we're going to have to let some people go, and hopefully we'll call you back sooner than later. Not knowing if that was going to be 6 months or 6 years, you just never know. So what I decided to do was return to my passion. I really didn't want to get a job, in some other field that frankly I wasn't really qualified for. I'm really good at flying airplanes, not so good at marketing or finance or real estate. So we ended up starting Rainier as just a tiny operation. It was me and my partner, Brad Donaldson, almost identical background as myself. We actually met in college, and our careers have just chased each other ever since. But we leased an airplane out of Boeing Field in Seattle, Washington, hung out a shingle, and just started doing what we love doing.
Yeah.
Fast forward 2, 3 years, we did end up getting recalled by Alaska, but in that intervening time, we somehow managed to create a reputation of, really providing quality instruction, not just checking the boxes to make sure that you can pass the test, but really preparing you to have a successful, safe flying career, whether it's for recreational purposes or for career aspirations. So we brought on more aircraft. We leased a few more. We ended up buying a couple of aircraft. Other instructors started taking notice and liked the way that we ran the operation. So they came on board as instructors, and the business really took on a life of its own. Today, it's been almost 15 years, but we've been extremely fortunate finding just fantastic people, really, is the core of our business. And currently have over 70 aircraft, probably 130 plus employees. Just loving every day.
It's amazing. I mean, it's very easy just to like kind of look back and look at the accomplishment that you kind of did. I think part of it is just staying in the game, but obviously it's not linear. There's some ups and downs, and I think even starting out, leasing a plane and also getting, like you said, getting a shingle, you had to put some type of upfront capital, right? So there's, it's not always net positive. Can you share kind of some of the challenges that you kind of faced when I guess there's different stages of running a business, right? So you kind of have your startup phase, you have your scaling phase, and kind of after that, probably that's around maybe I want to say 10 to 20 planes, and you're kind of more established. Then you have like the significance phase where you start really making a huge impact. But a lot of schools and a lot of businesses never get it out of the startup phase. And that's really one of the challenges we have in the industry, and not just our industry, but just as a whole, business owners, entrepreneurs, people that are trying to start businesses. How does a what's some advice you can give to a smaller school, and what are some of the challenges you did or you had, and then how did you overcome those challenges, and like how can other small schools kind of learn from your mistakes?
That's absolutely right. Fundamentally, even though we're doing something that we're all passionate about, being paid to fly airplanes is, the greatest job ever, right? But as a business owner, there's a lot of other considerations that you have to factor in. It's the regulatory requirements, making sure that, not just yourself, but all of your employees are compliant. Having a business strategy. One of the first things that we did, and I credit with a lot of our initial success, was actually developing a business plan. We reached out to the local small business administration and had a mentor kind of help me through that initial process. And it was painful. Believe me, this is not like something that you can spend a couple of hours in the afternoon and knock out. It really takes a lot of thoughtful introspection, doing a market research and analysis to figure out, what are your strengths and weaknesses, and how can you develop marketing strategies, the financial aspects. But you know what? Nothing is free in life. A well-crafted business plan, going through the process is really what you need to define your place in the market and set up your business for success.
I've heard this before, like a business plan and kind of running, doing that. What, in your opinion, is what should be included in a business plan? I think, you know, just kind of my story is, I used to make Right Rudder Marketing is not my first business. I had a few failures on the way before we had Right Rudder Marketing, and every time I'd make this like 50-page document for business plans, and like here's the market projection, here's the finances, here's my startup capital, whatever it is, here's the product, here's the manufacturing instructions for my product or whatever it is, and those always failed. And then surprisingly, right with the marketing, I kind of had an idea of what I wanted to do, and I didn't have a plan. I don't have a plan, but I never wrote it down. But I just started, and then here we are. So I mean, there's different ways to kind of skin the cat, so to speak. And I think it's maybe it's imperative we understand what are the fundamental core I guess aspects of a business plan that we need to have in mind, whether they're written or not. What's your take on that?
It doesn't have to be really formal. This isn't like an MBA project that you're going to turn in as a thesis. You certainly could if you want to go down that academic path. But really, you can take the core elements of a business plan, and simply going through that as a thought exercise is going to pay dividends. If you split it into multiple categories, you're probably going to determine, what's really important. The financial structure. If you're just starting out, aviation is very capital intensive, right?
Mm.
Aircraft, whether you're leasing or buying, are not cheap. So, how are you going to determine your pricing strategy? What will the market bear on a competitive, balance? If you have a leased airplane and you're looking to purchase, how can you forecast what type of revenue I need? What is my profit margin? Going through that exercise and actually running the numbers will give you a lot of tools to be able to adequately prepare and then scale as appropriate. If you're kind of winging it, yeah, you'll probably get by, but are there missed opportunities along the way? Do you have set goals and a plan to get there? That's really what the business plan is going to help you dial in. In addition, I would say, the marketing, determining what your niche is. Are you going to be just, you know, your average typical flight school that does zero to hero? Are you going to, set yourself apart by maybe providing, specialized tailwheel instruction or mountain flying instruction? There's so many niche areas that you can take advantage of. But ultimately, you need to define who you are and what sets you apart from your competitors. Why should people patronize you versus some other school, down the road?
Yeah, that's, in marketing terms, I believe that's called the unique value proposition, UVP. It's something that we try to teach our flight schools that we work with is how do we define what your brand is and what's your target market? What's your target avatar, right? So I
Mhm.
guess that kind of brings the next question up, like what is Rainier Flight Service's UVP and who's your target market? What are you trying to market towards?
Yeah. Yeah. I call our unfair advantage is our background and experience. There's a lot of really good instructors out there. Few have the opportunity to actually go through, flying for the airlines, being a part of training departments, seeing flying at that level, and then taking the best elements of, highly structured, standardized, professional flying and bringing it back to GA. So, for example, we all learn about ADM, right? In the airplane flying handbook, it talks a lot about, decision making processes and, the five P's and I am safe, all that good stuff. Well, at the airlines, we actually employ the same thing, but it's boiled down into a very simple process. So before every flight, we take a few moments and we perform what we call a threat and error management briefing, where we, as a crew or as an instructor and a client, discuss, okay, what's going to get us in trouble today? What are our threats? Is it aircraft status? Maybe there is an unresolved discrepancy. Is it weather? Is it traffic? Because it's a beautiful Saturday afternoon and there's going to be people that don't believe in radios using the traffic pattern with us. There's all kinds of potential threats out there. So why don't we actually identify them and come up with mitigation strategies? What are we going to do to minimize those threats as much as possible? And having that conversation just on a routine basis almost wires our brains to be thinking along those lines. After 5, 10 lessons, the students are going to be going through this in their mind driving to the airport. So that is what we're trying to instill. That is just second nature for us at the airlines. In addition, most airlines employ more of a, we call it AQP, where it's a train to proficiency model. We took the elements of that and applied it to general aviation and kind of wove in that scenario based training. So no one really wants to go out and do steep turns and slow flight and touch and goes and call it a day. I mean, sure, you can learn to fly an airplane doing that, but I think there's a lot more to be gained by actually placing students in specific situations with, little Easter eggs.
Mhm.
Let's throw some curveballs and see if you identify them and how you handle those challenges so that they learn and develop experience. Why we're here as instructors is to provide a safe environment for students to experience as much variety as possible so that by the time that they're on their own with that certificate in their wallet, you know that they are going to make good decisions and they'll be safe and have a long, enjoyable flying career.
What are some of the fun scenarios that you guys put students through? Like I think I had one that was like you're doing cross country and your grandma's with you or something like that, and your airport's an hour away, but she really has to use the restroom. What do you do? So that was a very easy one, but other ones can be a lot more difficult, like weather issues. What's the ceiling on? Let's say you have 1,000 foot ceiling and you're trying to do an IFR plan. What's some fun ones that maybe some instructors that are listening that can use, put in their toolbox?
Yeah, I like to take some very real world examples, and then you can do this no matter where you are in the country or the world. Up in our area, we are blessed being close to the mountains, by the ocean, a lot of dynamic weather and conditions. So, to your point, for like cross country planning, for example, why don't we use this as an opportunity to do a weight and balance exercise? Say a buddy is up in the San Juan Islands and he just had the mother load of crab traps this weekend. So you've got to go up to the San Juans, load up your airplane with as much fresh crab as you can pack in the coolers, and then take it over to another airport, drop it off, and then fly back. How are you going to work the weight and balance to figure that out, you know? So that's one element of it. And then, by the way, by the time you pick up the crab, maybe it takes a little bit longer to load up into the airplane. The weather is starting to get a little bit worse. You know, you see it trending down, it's deteriorating. Oh, and it's starting to get dark too. That second airport you're going to drop everything off of is kind of close to the mountains getting into the foothills. So you've got, terrain issues. What are you thinking about? How are you going to manage that? Is it legal? Is it safe? What can you do to minimize the threats?
Yeah. Legal and safe are two different things. I mean, there's a lot of things that are legal. I mean, technically, you could take off with zero visibility. Not as, I mean, and Part 91 operations at least. Whether it's legal or
That's
safe,
absolutely right.
yeah, but we have to employ a little bit of ADM as pilots to make sure that we're doing everything, proficiently and safely, right? Let's roll it back to growing the business. So I know we were getting into like kind of the nitty gritty of instructing but a lot of people here are business owners, and we with the CFIs already, and they kind of know the CFI game. Well, one of the things that you mentioned when you were talking about starting Rainier Flight Service was having a great team. And I think that's so important for any business, no matter where you are in your business cycle or business phase, whether you're in startup, whether you're in scaling, whether you're in significance phase, whether you're in like the growth phase. How did you, I guess, find an elite team of individuals to join Rainier Flight Service to take it from a few couple leased aircraft to multiple locations, 70 planes. Obviously, I know there's just a time factor in there as well. As long as you're in the game and you just keep doing it year after year and you just keep growing and hitting the right targets, it's one thing. But I think having the right people accelerates your growth, right? So, what's kind of your tips for interviewing and finding the right people and recruiting?
There's a few different aspects of that. One is, finding the right people is really key. When you're developing your business, you as the leader of the organization are responsible for creating the culture. And it's ultimately going to be, what you decide is the way that your employees, deliver a customer experience, whether it's good or bad. Fortunately, in aviation, most people are pretty passionate about what we do. So it's not hard to find people that are really excited and want to share that excitement with future generations of aviators. So as we've grown, we've actually employed a lot of people that were previous clients. So maybe they came to us, they got their private, but their background was in finance. Our director of finance today is a CPA. He had a career, a very successful one, working for, accounting organizations, but he loved airplanes. And what better solution than to mirror those two up? Use and leverage your experience and background with a very critical skill set in managing the business, but do it in an environment where you're surrounded by airplanes. If it's a beautiful day and all the bills are paid and the work is done and it's 2 o'clock, grab an available airplane and go out and enjoy the benefits. That's something that no accounting firm is going to be able to offer as employee benefit. So we've taken a lot of people that, began as clients from us and then just wanted to stay involved in some capacity, hopefully leveraging their prior experience and skill sets.
Kind of mentioned over there brand and culture. So you hire these good people, they're the previous students, and you help them get their private, maybe you got them to instrument commercial CFI, depending on where they want to take their career at. But they really loved your business. They really loved the instruction you gave, the product and service that you offered them, and so much so that it was enough to kind of say, hey, you're able to work here and make a living here. There is some type of culture brand that's associated. I mean, not all flight schools are equal, right? I think I've walked into a few flight schools where I was like, I would never work here, but I mean, I'll still fly your plane at least once. But
Yeah.
there's other schools where I go there repetitively. Like there's like there's some places where I rent planes repetitively. Whether it's price, whether it's the people that how they greet me, whether it's how they maintain their aircraft. What's the brand and culture at Rainier Flight Service, and how did you establish that? And how did you come up with it?
I often fall back on our core values. When we were in our early days, drafting that business plan, one of the exercises is really thinking about what defines you, what is really important to you and your organization. And I know it's kind of gotten to be a little cliche. People put core values on their website and it's almost like this virtue signaling. But really, when it's done right, what you're trying to incorporate into the culture of your operation. And one of those is integrity for us. I know we've all heard horror stories about, flight schools that have taken advantage of students, maybe taken large sums of money up front and then ended up closing their doors and students are left out in the cold.
Yeah.
It really it taints aviation in a very bad light when that happens. And I wanted to be very careful and make sure that when we're developing policies, procedures, handling challenging situations, that we always fall back on what is the right thing to do. Maybe it's not the cheapest solution, maybe it's going to cost us some money, but what is best for the client? And I found that if you really stick to your integrity, it will pay dividends in your reputation and the culture and the way that your employees represent your organization and think and go about their daily tasks. So again, back to the business plan, really thinking about what type of business do I want to run? What type of reputation do I want to create? And stick to it.
Yeah, I think the core value thing is very. There's two ways it can go. It can either be overused and just kind of thrown away as there's no value to it. It's like, hey, yeah, we have core values like strength. Like I was working for Tyson Foods, for example, before I was a pilot and all that stuff, and they would call it the 5 C's. Like candor, caring, but everyone in management they didn't care. We're just there for a job.
It's kind of lip service. Yeah.
So it's like, did the core values actually hold weight? It was not until someone from corporate came down and started breathing it down our throats that we said, okay, yeah, we care. We'll be candid, we'll use the 5 C's. But if you actually went to the plant level, it just wasn't actually lived. And I think they're trying to change that. I think they're trying to, I think they are working better. To maybe they changed the core values since I've been there. But then on the other hand, you have core values where it does mean something, and it does actually impact the business. That's how we run. And I think if you do it right, it should help. And I learned this from some of my mentors as well, is that these core values should align with your mission and vision of the company, because that way, because you can't really, as a business owner, you can't be everywhere every time at every place. You have to be able to delegate the work to your team members, and you have to trust your team members, right? So if they're not really rowing in the same way, and they're just kind of, I'm gonna do it my way, and I could care less and all that stuff, and they're not really following the core values that you've established, they're not really marching towards the mission vision, you're gonna, your business is not going to start scaling and growing. Kind of on the same note here, so you mentioned core values, and there's a whole culture thing with that, and it really leads into mission and vision. So I kind of want to segue this conversation into the mission and vision of not so much Rainier as well, but also just Gordon. What is your mission and vision? What are you trying to do? Because obviously you've scaled Rainier to quite a big level here. Where do you see, I guess, your enterprises kind of lead into in the next couple of years, 5 years, 10 years, 30 years? What type of impact are you trying to drive to your customers and your students? Where are you trying to take
Yeah, boy, I wish I had a very clear answer because honestly, I'm just enjoying the ride.
it?
We've been very fortunate. The flight school has been extremely successful. And again, I give credit to, the team making it happen. We provide the mission and the vision, which is to provide safe, affordable, effective flight training in a fun environment. Because let's be honest, if you're not looking forward to going to the airport and flying around on a beautiful day, we're doing something incredibly wrong. So it's got to be safe and good use of the client's time and money and produce safe future pilots. I think in the future, I'll backtrack a little bit. As we scaled the operation,
Hmm.
especially when you get from that like 3 to 5 airplane up to 15, 20 aircraft, it takes more than just people to be able to scale effectively. You need to put in like workflows and tools and policies so that you can, maintain standardization and efficiencies. There's simply no way to do that without leveraging technology. And we looked at all of the different solutions on the market, try to find what is going to accommodate our scheduling needs, our finances, safety management, all of the different elements of running a flight school. And there really wasn't anything available, or at least nothing that touched all the points that we were looking to integrate. So, fortunately, being in the Seattle area, we do have one or two tech people around. Some may have been clients, and we actually developed our internal system for integrating all of these different aspects of running the operation. And that's where Needle Nine was born. We spent a couple of years in development being really thoughtful on what would be an ideal solution? We have an opportunity to create something from scratch. What would that look like? So we broke down workflows on lead generation and the sales funnel and ensuring a positive onboarding experience for new clients getting started. It's very confusing if you don't know what you're doing. There's so much information being thrown at you. We wanted to boil it down and make it just as easy and simple as possible. And the software helps us accomplish that. Then, as they complete their training, making sure that they know exactly what to expect every single flight lesson. How can I prepare and use that time with my instructor as efficiently as possible? What are my strengths and weaknesses? All of the integrated lesson records are right there and completely transparent so people know exactly where they're at, all the way to, paying my invoices and managing my account balances, safety management. So after a few years of collecting feedback from our clients and iterating, stabilizing the system, we thought, you know what, there's probably a lot of other flight schools out there that could use a tool like this too. And we can't be the only ones that are struggling. So we decided to open it up and license it to other schools around the country. And that's really been our focus is, not just providing a software tool, because I know there's many out there, but how can we help them use it effectively? I'm not just looking for subscribers to a software system as I am developing a robust, healthy industry.
That's a mouthful. So it's a lot.
Yeah.
We kind of went from mission and vision to Neo 9. So I'm glad we brought this up. You mentioned there's a struggle point. So around 3 to 5 aircraft, you're able to kind of do it on your own, kind of use your own systems and stuff. Once you get above 10, approximately, there starts to be some system breakdowns. I think that's what you mentioned here, like 10 to 15, perhaps. And yeah, there's different solutions out there, different software companies. Some of them have already been on the podcast. Let's take it one by one. So, what are some of the, I guess, challenges or obstructions or maybe system breakdowns that you encountered when you did start to scale from, let's say, like 5 to 10 aircraft to like 10 to 15 aircraft? What are some of those specific, I guess, examples of like, hey, I can't use this, I can't use my Excel sheet anymore? What are some of those, I guess, problems that you might have had?
Yeah, I would say a big one is the financial management. You could hire just more and more employees to take care of the just the basic clerical accounting stuff, or you could let the software do it all for you. And I wanted to, keep the head count to a minimum, keep our overhead costs as low as we can. I'm a firm believer in operating a lean organization and pass those savings along to the client. At the flight school, our model has never been to be like the most expensive or the cheapest on the market. There's many great flight schools out there. What we strive to be is like the Costco. We want to provide, the best value for your money. So that kind of puts us in that sweet spot. And if we can keep our overhead, within that window, we can also keep our rates at an affordable level where kids coming out of high school can actually become a pilot while working a summer job. That's tough to do these days. It's gotten really expensive. So the financial management is a big time savings. All of the invoices are generated automatically through the system. It seamlessly syncs with QuickBooks. Customers can manage their payment methods. That will automatically process and then post the receipts to their account. So there is zero manual intervention. Maybe once a week or once a month, we'll kind of audit the records and just make sure that everything is looking good. But our employees are spending their time focusing on higher level finance stuff. Like,
Yeah.
are our aircraft profitable? We can run reports on, if we look at the fleet, which aircraft are performing well and which are spending more time in the hangar than we anticipated, so we can gain insights and make informed decisions to continue to improve the business. That's one big example. As you start to scale the operation, it's easy to get so caught up in the day-to-day stuff you lose the big picture.
Financial management aspect of any business is very important. So there's a few, I guess we can kind of, what do you call it, go step by step with the different processes in financial management because I think it's important. I think as running a business, I mean, one of the things that we try to tell when we're prospecting for future flight schools too is like if you have no revenue and if you have no profit, then you're not really operating a successful business. And one of the things we help at Right Rudder Marketing at least is to generate your top line revenue. That way, hopefully over time, your bottom line does increase. So one of the things you mentioned is running a lean organization and keeping your head count low. Lean, by the way, and I think a lot of people misconstrue what the meaning of lean was because it did derive from manufacturing, and that's kind of my background was lean manufacturing. A lot of it was actually from Toyota. Toyota was actually it was the forerunner to the continuous improvement methodology with a thing called Kaizen. What that means is continuously improving every single day. We have like daily huddles, for example. We have notes that we do. We have follow-ups every week. We also have what's called just-in-time production. So, as we scale the business, do we have the right amount of people? Running a lean organization doesn't just mean like chopping heads off, I think it's what people think about, if they first hear that term, they're like, oh, then you just gotta fire everybody. That's not right. I've, in my experience in business and also, running manufacturing factories and all that stuff and also running my own business, you know, the question of overhead and headcount is a very big one. So, I have a number in my head as far as what the appropriate percentage of budget I should be spending towards people is. I'd like to kind of hear your take on it before I give my number away. So, what's your approximate? Let's make the numbers even. So let's say we're let's say $100. Let's say our revenue is $100. How many of those $100 should be spent towards, paying people and hiring people and so on?
Boy, I'd have to compare like the KPIs and the financials. I'd say in general, we actually pay our employees very well. I'm sure there's a wide variety in flight schools and the benefits they offer, but we can actually, pay top market rates to our staff
Yeah.
while setting high expectations. We tell our instructors, look, we know that you're going to be moving on to the airlines in a year and a half, 2 years. That's totally fine. I was there myself. I get it. What we do expect, though, is while you're here, you deliver the best quality training that you can, and we're going to treat you as professionals and pay you as professionals. So we offer health benefits, 401k, PTO, all that kind of stuff, but we also expect high performance in return. So when I say lean, I mean more efficient.
Yeah.
Let's use the resources available to the maximum extent and not just throw money at solving problems. That's where my partner and I think, have worked so well together because we're always bouncing ideas off each other and trying to figure out, you know, how do we solve this problem? And usually between the two of us, we come up with a halfway decent answer. And it's usually like, let's get creative. Let's stay hungry and lean and figure out the root cause and address that versus just cutting a check and making it go away. That's what I mean by, lean mentality running an operation.
Yeah, I like that. So yeah, we spend X amount per employee as well. One of the things that you mentioned here is the benefits and stuff like that. So as a member and a sponsor of what's called Flight School Association of North America, FASANA, they do give a lot of consulting and advice towards flight schools. And one of the kind of biggest themes I've heard, and I don't know if you could agree with this, is W-2 versus 1099. So for CFIs, obviously it's a revolving door. They're in, they're out, they're trying to get their flight hours in, 15, magic 1500, and they go to the airlines. What's your advice for, I guess, hiring them? Do you go W-2? Do you go 1099? And if so, uh, how do you manage that at Rainier Flight Service? And also, if do you use Needle 9 also for kind of HR records and all that stuff too, or what's the extent of how does Needle 9 kind of play a part into this?
Yeah, well, the needle nine part, again, it just helps us realize efficiencies because it tracks all of the hours billed by instructor, by type. I can run reports to know exactly, what percentage of our revenue is coming from flight instruction versus ground instruction versus, stage check evaluations. All of that rich data I can manipulate in any way I want to gain insights. But I think your overall question around the contractor versus employee really kind of depends on the state. Here in the state of Washington, it's pretty black and white. If you're telling an instructor, hey, I need you to be here, for these hours per day, and you're going to deliver the instruction per my syllabus, it's pretty hard to argue that they're really an independent contractor. They're really representing your business and organization and doing it in a way that you expect representing your company. Whereas an independent contractor is much more of like a flying club.
Mm,
If
yeah.
it's just, you know, I'm a club member like everyone else that happens to have a CFI certificate and I set my own hours, I can do whatever I want, then yeah, clearly you're just an independent contractor doing your own thing. But I encourage businesses, I understand the temptation to save a buck in taxes and, you know, try to stay under the radar. But you got to be careful because if there was an audit and the state determined that, yeah, all of these employees that you've been paying as contractors really are employees. And by the way, we calculated the back taxes that are owed. You did not want to be in that
No,
position.
that's a horrible place to go.
Talk with a CPA or an accounting professional in your specific jurisdiction, and at least know exactly where you stand, so what your potential exposure.
Love that. Let's get into like kind of the software because we're about 15 minutes left on the show. I want to kind of you kind of mentioned some of the cool features there. So you were able to kind of look at the billable hours as far as where it goes. And you're able to do invoicing, scheduling. What are some of the things that we might have missed as far as features that we haven't talked about yet so far?
Well, I mean, the non-sexy stuff that's critically important, like, documentation.
I think
You
documentation is
know,
very
it's
sexy, man. I don't know what you're talking about.
It's so important. I mean, you got to make sure that you're compliant with all the FAA records. If you're 141, there's all kinds of, currency requirements for your aircraft, for your instructors, and properly organized software will just take all of that off your plate and tell you, hey, by the way, Tim is due for his 141 annual currency by the end of the month. Do you want to get that scheduled? Yes, I do. I don't have to track it and think about it all the time. TSA, obviously, everyone is worried about, oh, the TSA is going to come in and do their annual audit of our records, so we better spend a couple of weeks, getting everything in order. For us, it's come by anytime you want. All I've got to do is pull up the records. It'll take 5 minutes, and it's really zero stress. It's simple. But you have to have the processes in place to do that, and the software just makes it really simple. One thing that I'm actually pretty excited about and I feel, personally passionate about is safety management. Maybe it's my airline background, but having that philosophy or making it part of your company culture that we value safety, that we're always looking for continuous improvement and kind of that threat and error management model that I was talking about, for pre-flight preparation can apply for your business as a whole. If you look at your operation and think, okay, what are our threats as a flight school? What is going to get our students hurt, our instructors hurt, or in trouble or violated? And what can we proactively do to mitigate that as much as possible? We actually provide a lot of our flight school subscribers, a template for a safety management systems manual and say, here, take this document, edit it up, make whatever changes are appropriate for your operation, and try to get your staff on board to, if they witness something, if they experience something, whether it's a Class B bust or someone fell off the ladder checking the fuel on the wing, report it so that now we've got this data source that we can track over time and see trends and figure out, do we need to improve our curriculum to address a weak area? Do we need to provide resources to our ground operations? If you don't know, you can't really do anything about it, right?
Right.
So the safety management is a big cornerstone of our system that I think, or I hope, has a good positive impact on the operators.
I think I know it's required for I believe Part 121 operations and SMS, right? But I believe if I've heard this right in the industry, it's starting to roll out down to the ab initio level, to the Part 61 or Part 61 141 level too. Um, so a lot of people that are just starting out, maybe building in their own flight school, maybe they were in your shoes like where you were a couple, decades ago when you were at one Leach plane, and they're hearing, hey, we got to implement an SMS system, a safety management system. What would be, I guess, the kind of the requirements to run that, and how would Needle Nine help you to establish, an SMS system at your flight school?
Really, all you need is the will to take it seriously. That's when I was saying, I'm not really interested in just, having people subscribe to the system as I am making sure that you know how to use the tools properly to improve your profitability and safety and efficiencies. So, using safety as an example, we'll provide you a template, a handbook that you can modify and incorporate into your organization. I'm happy to get on a call with you and say, here's the kind of the philosophical things that you want to instill, or here are some practical tasks that you can
Uh,
do to implement this tool. The system itself allows any person to either anonymously or they can self-report any kind of safety thing that they experience. And that goes to a specific individual identified in the system who's responsible for safety management, and they respond either by taking a specific action or just saying, that was a one off event. Nothing exactly needs to be done about it, but maybe we want to track it for trend information. Based on the results of that, then you can start looking at, do I need to make this a point of discussion at the next instructor meeting and beef up standardization? Do I need to modify our checklist procedures so that, this step isn't being consistently missed that we're seeing over and over, or whatever that remediation strategy is?
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of the things that they're implementing here in the airlines applies to manufacturing. So I know manufacturing is not related to aviation, but we had anonymous reporting, we had safety committees, we had a committee chair, typically known as a safety officer. And they had regularly, frequently scheduled audits. They'd go around, walk the ramp, check things, make sure it's all right, and they do interviews. That's I think those are some of the core features of implementing SMS. Obviously, you'd have to read the documents, and get that. I think that you provide a really great service by providing kind of a template and leading them on the way to get compliant. So we are in the last kind of 10 minutes in this show here, and I want to kind of give you the opportunity to kind of do some final call to actions and some pitches out there. So we talked about how you grow Rainier Flight Service and your process of growing it from one plane to over 70 planes, 4 locations. You met a lot of struggles, and I think that kind of hit around that 10 airplane mark roughly. You notice like, hey, there's invoicing issues, there's financial issues. How do we get people going? There's having the right team in place and making sure that the core values are instilled correctly, and that we're actually offering our UVP, our unique value prop, to our customers correctly, right? There's also safety concerns too, making sure that we're implementing a proper safety management system. There's scheduling concerns. A lot of these challenges that you've encountered along the way, you use those challenges to build Needle Nine, right? So walk us through, like, if someone is starting out, let's say they're at that level, let's say they're around $1 million in revenue, usually is around 7 planes, if I calculate this right, 7, 8 planes. They might be around $1 million in revenue, maybe $1.5 million in annual revenue, but they're trying to grow to, let's say, 3 million, or let's say 5 million. Maybe their mission, hopefully they establish a mission and vision, is to be a bigger school, to open up another location. What's your kind of offer? What's your pitch to kind of help these people to achieve their goals?
If I were to give like advice or recommendations, it's to, stack your bench. I'm certainly not smart enough to do all of this on my own. I'm a pilot. I fly airplanes. I don't know anything about finance or market strategies or, any of that. I understand that it's important and I want to do it properly. So, as we've grown, you face different challenges at different points in your scaling. When you hit 10 airplanes, it's more about, okay, consolidating workflows and trying to maintain efficiencies, because having a paper ledger isn't going to work anymore. Once you get to 20, 30 airplanes, the challenge is going to be standardization. How can I ensure that, my staff, my instructors are delivering the quality that I expect? And I don't have the time to, mentor and monitor that 24 hours a day. So I'm going to have to delegate some of that stuff to other people. And that's where you start to, grow your organization and put those workflows in place for measuring instructor performance. How do you proactively, look at training records to identify client issues before they have to come to you with complaints? Much rather nip it in the bud before it gets out of control. So if you can find the people such as yourself, chances are you're not going to be an expert in marketing, but you know that it's a critical part of growing your business. So find someone like Tim and explain, this is where I'm at, this is where I want to be. As an expert, what can you help me accomplish so that, we can meet our goals and our targets? Finances, find that CPA or accountant that can be an external set of eyes and making sure that your books are in order, so that when you need to go to the bank and get that loan to buy a new airplane, it's not this stressful, drawn out process. You're well organized. You got everything in order. An attorney, just like you have a personal doctor that you go to, you've got a relationship, but they understand your background and your history. You want that attorney to be your advocate so that when something comes up, You can just go to them and know that it'll be handled properly according to your core values with integrity and so forth. But that would be my advice is find your all-star team. And the earlier you can do it, the faster it's going to propel you to scale.
And I think that's completely correct. I think even in Right Rudder Marketing, we have, I've gone through a few CPAs to be honest with you. I mean, I don't know. It's a mixed bag. It's kind of like hiring too. Like, we've gone through a few employees as well here at Right Rudder Marketing, and some of them, maybe it didn't work out. But other people that remained on the team, we wouldn't be where we're at without them. To be honest with you, like I like to say that we have a team of rock stars. I think it's so important is finding your all-star team. Make sure they're all A players. I think you mentioned CPA was good, so accounting, legal, finance. You got also instructors, the people actually doing, the technician work, going out there and flying the planes, delivering your service and product, right? I like how you kind of like you're really giving the bigger picture stuff. You're not really, what do you call it? You're not. I like how you're like when I talk to you, you're really trying to help. You're not trying to say here's my software. Just please subscribe. I find it very refreshing, to be honest with you, that it's as someone who's gone through the battlefield, who's already gone through all this stuff. You let your experience kind of speak for yourself. Let's say a flight school does want to kind of maybe consult with you. They want to say, hey, because I think, by the way, for any business, if you want to grow your business, the best way to grow your business is to find someone that has already done what you're trying to achieve. So, for me, I'm running a marketing agency, and we're helping flight schools all over the U.S. And what I'm trying to do is I have coaches and mentors that have grown agencies in other spaces, maybe in plumbing or roofing or something like that. But they went from zero clients or zero flight schools to hundreds. And I asked them for their take on it, how they would do, let's say, Google ads or SEO and things like that. I think for flight schools running a flight training operation, the best advice that's out there is to really find someone that has done it, has done the things that you've done. And I think Gordon here is a prime example of that. So if someone wants to kind of consult with you or use some of the software tools that you have done, how do we do that? How do we, I guess, schedule a call with you? How do we actually, implement your system? At what price does it cost to run Needle Nine at my school? Maybe you can kind of
Yeah.
elaborate with that.
No, happy to. I'd say we're really easy to find. If you go to just needle9.com online, you'll find our webpage, and it has the general information of the features, many of I've already discussed. To really help you understand how it will impact your operation, the best way is to schedule a demo. If you go through the website and you fill out the contact form, we'll set up an hour where we can just talk one-on-one. Explain to me what your current challenges are. What are your biggest frustrations every day? And I'll explain to you how we might be able to help. Some of that might be using Needle 9 as effective software because the features that we designed almost certainly will address your frustration because I've been there myself. I know what you're talking about. But more importantly, we'll talk about, how do you use this effectively? How can you implement it and train your staff? And if we need to do some staff training, I've done that many times where, hey, let's get all of your instructors together for an hour and we'll just deep dive into lesson grading and making sure that your students understand exactly where they're at and how to prepare for the lessons so they're not wasting your time. It's more than just functionality. It's about, incorporation and indoctrination. So that's where we're here to support you. If there's, really specific expert assistance that you need, oftentimes it's around the financial sector because that's probably one of the most challenging parts of the business if you don't come from that background. We do have real professional experience accountants that they can consult on just a case-by-case basis. If you need to clean up your chart of accounts to get the right reporting and the insights that you're looking for, we'll spend a couple of hours with you and make sure that we set that up for you properly. The pricing for Needle 9, we decided to do a little bit differently because I know, especially small operations, the margins are so slim. You can't afford hundreds of thousands of dollars for these software subscriptions. What we wanted to do instead is actually make it free to flight schools. And I actually mean that. There's zero cost to the operation. Instead, just like Ticketmaster, when you go online and you buy a concert ticket, there's a small service fee that's tacked onto the invoice, and that's for the Ticketmaster, making their margin off of use of the system. We do a similar thing. A student checks out an airplane with an instructor, they go fly, they come back and check in. The invoice is automatically generated based off of your rates and the instructor's time. So if it's $250 invoice for a normal training flight, we'll tack on $1. To date, we haven't had a single person bat an eye over a $1 service fee for, a $250 instruction event. So the operator collects that service fee as part of just the normal invoicing. And then once a week, we'll send you a list of here's all of the check-ins that you had for the last 7 days. You owe us, the $36 or whatever it is that you collected from your student. And that's it. So it's very simple. You get full features. There's no add-on charges to integrate QuickBooks or safety management or training records. In fact, we've got a new partnership with Gold Seal. So if your students are taking the online ground seal school with Gold Seal, it will automatically import all of their training progress into the Needle 9 LMS. That's all free. So hopefully it's a very attractive value proposition to flight schools out there. Almost more importantly, we're here to support your business holistically.
Love that. So yeah, if you're interested in, working with Gordon, if you're looking at, potentially solutions for your flight school for operations, I think Needle 9 is definitely a good option for you. Very amazing, unique value proposition here. So yeah, go to needle9.com. That will help you just to see what it's all about. Fill out that contact form, get in contact with Gordon's team. They'll schedule a one-on-one with you and kind of see what you're really about and see if it's a good fit and if it can help. If you choose to run with it, I think what Gordon said, it's $1 per flight, which is relatively very low. I think after talking to a lot of other similar systems out there, you can be paying thousands, if not tens of thousands a month, implementing these software systems at your school. And I think, one of the things that, as you grow and scale our business is the technology debt. You really want to make sure that you consolidate some of the things that you're doing. That way you can, save on that overhead and have a bigger bottom line. Revenue is what's it called? Vanity, and profit is sanity, right? So make sure you have a good profit margin and you're able to grow your school. So I really want to thank Gordon for hopping onto this podcast. This is the Right Rudder Marketing Podcast. If you are a B2B business or a vendor or a flight school even in the training market, I encourage you to give us a call. Our phone number is 314-804-1200. Let's talk. If you want to hop on this podcast, go ahead and give me a call. Also, if you are a flight school or an aviation business and you're looking to grow and scale your business, Right Rudder Marketing has experience for the past couple of years helping schools go from below $1 million to multiple seven figures. RightRudderMarketing.com. Go into that link over there and schedule a call with either myself or one of my team members. In addition, you can also email us directly. We have info@RightRudderMarketing.com. We will try to respond as quick as possible. We currently do have territory exclusivity, so we only work with one flight school per airport. So there's a lot of spots available. There's also a lot of spots not available. Give us a call, and if you want to work with us, we're really happy to talk to you. So, and to conclude this podcast episode, I really want to thank again Gordon for hopping on here, and we'll end here. So thank you, Gordon.
My pleasure, Tim. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, guys. See you guys next time.